Hi folks, I'm Sheila and welcome to Counsellor Convos. Let's get stuck in. Hi folks, welcome to another episode of Counsellor's Convos. Now you haven't seen me for a while because I got married. So I have been away for a couple of months folks, but I'm delighted to be back. And this may well be the last podcast for the year, for 2024. So for any newbies listening here, I am a qualified mental health counsellor and we are going to be talking about men's mental health. And I am delighted to be joined with the lovely Mr. Phil Watson. Hello, Phil.
Hello, Sheila. Thank you for that awesome introduction.
Good stuff. And just to continue on, Phil, with the introduction, if you'd like to introduce yourself to our listeners in however you like.
Okay. Well, I suppose professionally, I'm Phil Watson. I'm half of HR Unlimited, a small, wide-spectrum human resource and people management operation operating around the Midlands, based in Lichfield. On a human level, I'm just a bloke, a happily married bloke. Well, that's my perspective. Just don't ask my wife. With 3 children, 5 grandchildren, and a dog who has trouble controlling his bladder and bowels. So just a normal guy.
Okay, good stuff. And I love the balance of the two, Phil. The balance of the two that, yes, on one half of you is the business person, but then the other half of you is just your average guy living life as best as you can. And as part of this podcast is talk about men's mental health. We're going to be talking about balance. We're going to be talking about what keeps us healthy and happy, because sometimes our businesses can drive us mental, to say the least. What do you think about that statement, Phil?
I think, well, there are several flaws in it. One is you call me balanced, and anyone who knows me knows I'm absolutely not balanced. But seriously, folks, it's really, I still find it difficult, and I've been kind of floating my own boat for 16 years, finding that balance between wanting to be successful in your professional business endeavours and being successful as a husband, partner, as a father, as a grandfather. So that kind of juxtaposition between the money, which is there if you work hard enough, and the satisfaction and the happiness. Wow, that goes kind of up and down. Absolutely. Like nobody's business. And it seldom levels out, if I'm perfectly honest. But we need an awareness of that to try and get a handle on it sometimes if it goes too far out of sync.
Absolutely. It's like putting all your eggs into one basket. And if all your eggs are to do with work related, what can happen is that when one thing goes wrong within work, it can feel like the end of your world, because effectively your work has become your whole world. Yeah. It's very interesting what you said about that balance, the happy medium between earning the money, but then still having enough of a lifestyle where you're still able to have healthy relationships, because I've seen that so many times, especially with older guys that would have been the breadwinners, that they would have been that kind of generational stereotypical male role provider, if you like. And then we'll say, for example, the pandemic comes along and they're not able to do their jobs, and then sometimes they realise that they don't actually have healthy relationships with their own family because they've been at work all the time. And it's nobody's fault. There's no judgment in that. It's that kind of links us into male roles, and again that lack of balance of having the money but also having healthy relationships, because it's about both. We need both.
Sure. And I mean, it's no different whether you're employed, you're a wage slave, or whether you're running your own business. Except that I would argue that you're skewed a little more when it is your business, or you're a director in a business, because that gets even more tied up, I would argue, in that feeling of self-worth, which becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah.
You get a little bit of success, you want to expand on that, you want to accelerate, and that then becomes the new norm for you. And that brings its own pressures on your family, and on yourself. The things that wake you up, the things that wake you up at 4 o'clock in the morning, those little niggles that you didn't even know were there, but they quite clearly are there because they wake you up bolt upright. It's not just because I need a wee. There is that as well, but it's about the pressure of things just coalescing in your mind, and it's really difficult to find a release, I've found, and more importantly, this isn't about me. My clients share this with me because in an HR role, it's not just about the people management. You get a kind of sometimes a bit of a barrage because it's lonely when you're running a business. You're not sure what you can share with whom. So a third party, an outsider, that'll be me, is quite easy to open up to often. And so I see this reflected to me. So it's not just me. Thank God for that. But it doesn't help.
Absolutely. And that in itself, that's why it's so important for men and women, for business owners in general, to talk, because all those worries, all those anxieties, everybody has those. And sometimes when you know that it's not just you, that can be massive in itself. I want to come back to something you were saying earlier on when we talk about success, and then kind of we can be our own worst enemy the way we get more successful, and then we want more of that, and sometimes then that becomes more responsibility, more work. What is success?
Sorry, you're asking me. How would I know?
Because
I'm joking. I'm sorry.
Isn't it interesting, Phil, the way that, it's like when we put things into perspective, like for any of the listeners here, if somebody had told you 20 years ago or 30 years ago that you'd be where you're at now, I bet you most people probably wouldn't believe it. They'd probably think, wow, I've got my own business. I've got people that pay to do stuff. I've got people that need me. I make a difference to people's lives. I employ people, whatever position you're in. I bet you that if you look back in yourself, let's say your younger self, and said, if someone was to tell you that this is where you're going to be, would you see that as success? And I bet that most times that younger self would think, wow, that's amazing. And it'd be almost like, if you said, would you see that as that you've achieved success? It'd be like, yes. It'd be like, for me, training to be as a counsellor, I remember dreaming that if I had my own practice, that would be it. That would be amazing. I've reached success. Effectively, that is me now. And what I've realised is that sometimes we can get into this kind of a bit of a rat race, a bit of always feeling that we need to be doing more, and therefore never feeling good enough. But when we put some perspective on our lives, when we look back years ago and think, if I said to you that you are where you are now, would you see that as successful? Most people would say yes.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, my mum, maybe your mum, used to say to you, much wants more. You very quickly become accustomed to what you've got, and you want some more.
Yeah.
And I see that as different to greed. It's just a kind of an assumption, an acceptance of where you are, and a belief that success is being a little bit further down the line, a little bit better at whatever it is. And it's, note to self, don't get me started on my rant about cookies. They're just evil little things that drive advertising and sales on all the websites. So don't get me started on that. Note to self. But, it's so easy to get sucked into the hologram that is success. It's presented to us shimmering and beautiful in vibrant colours of what success looks like. Yeah. And you can lose yourself chasing that hologram. And success is success is in the mind.
Yeah.
and it's very easy for your mind to be stolen by those very clever little cookies.
Yeah, that is so true, Phil. When I was doing my counselling training, we had loads of sessions on the media and its agenda and how ads are specifically done to make people feel insecure. And there's a commonality with that. That's the thing with success, always feeling like you should be doing more and never quite feeling enough. And that kind of links in with imposter syndrome and stuff like that. That feeds into us being far too hard on ourselves. I put it out to you, the listeners. What if we're already successful?
Yeah. I hear that. By no means am I a counsellor, but I hear that with all of my clients.
Yeah.
They're men, they're women of a wide variety of ages, going through different stages in their own life, their family life, their business life, and to a man or woman, they share with me the pressure that's on them and the feeling that they're not doing enough, they're not good enough, they're not playing their part. They're not supporting their employees as much as they would wish to. They're worried about the impact of, the business isn't doing especially well right now, and the impact on the employees, put them on short time, making them redundant, or just not having a lot for them to do, and them being aware of it and being worried about whether or not they're going to be on short time or redundancy. It's absolutely huge, and I'm so. I feel so blessed that when I kind of came off the corporate hamster wheel, that I've been able to mix with people in SMEs, with one-man bands, people in SMEs, people in micro businesses, family businesses, and actually see that and be a part of supporting them, even if that's just listening to them and giving them alternative strategies, or just almost saying, kind of there, you're not on your own. Bill down the road got the same thing. Why don't you pick up the phone and talk to him, because he's got similar sort of problems, and connecting.
Absolutely, Phil, because at the end of the day, all we can do is our best. And that's good enough. All we can do is, we don't always know what problem's going to come up. We don't always know how we're going to solve it. But what we can do is connect with other people, maybe be part of a networking group as we do, build that resources around us, that support, and learn from other people who have done similar things to us. That's all we can do here, Phil, and that's enough. Now, it's interesting, you mentioned there about getting off the corporate hamster wheel. And I'm curious about that, Phil, because you now put yourself in a different position. You're effectively a consultant, a HR consultant, whereas before you were very much within that corporate hamster wheel. What's the sort of, I don't know, what's your learnings from all of that, Phil, having coming from two different perspectives? Whatever you're happy to share, Phil.
Yeah, well, it wasn't, if I'm honest, it wasn't a matter of choice. So I resented it for a couple of years, I guess, because it's for redundancy. Although in my world, it's a no fault dismissal. It's a dismissal nevertheless, and there's an element of uncertainty. And had I not been more successful, would I have been chosen, or was it nothing to do with that? It's just that actually there's a restructuring, and it's about efficiencies.
Yeah.
But it was a very. There were lots of relationships, within that big corporate. I mean, it was Sainsbury's. I mean, it was huge. It still is huge.
Yeah.
But it was a little bit soulless. Your contacts were often kind of a name on a Rolodex. How old am I? Rolodex. You know what I mean? They were on a screen somewhere, and you just dial that number and that extension. You get talking to them. The difference is I actually contact with the pink squishy things who are right in the front line of businesses, who are the people having the conversations with their customers, their clients, and equally transmitting what's required to their customers. So it's all very, I suppose, tactile. Sounds a bit seedy in today's world, but it's all very immediate in a smaller in a smaller business, and your actions and reactions have an almost instantaneous effect. And business owners and business managers are not unaware of that. They know that they are in a position of power. They know that there's a power imbalance, and that in itself, that self-management of that power imbalance, because that's what it is again a level of stress that you get used to after a few years of doing it. But it's there. It's always there. And you question yourself, and you have a bad day, and you've had a row with a wife, and you go in and you're a bit sharp with some of your, some of his team. And I don't know any of my clients who haven't reflected to that on me. I wasn't really very fair to that particular employee, and I gave him a piece of my mind when actually, to be fair, it's just I'd got one on me.
But you know something, Phil? Like you've touched upon lots of different things here. Like one is self-accountability. We can all have a bad day. We can all have an outburst. It's accepting that we're all human beings and being accountable for that. Saying sorry about that. Something's going on at home. I apologise for that. It's a self-accountability. Other bits you touched upon there was almost being complacent. So what I do find is that, especially with a lot of my own clients, that they become part of a family. Don't you love the word family? And I'm being so sarcastic when I say that, Phil, because oftentimes organisations sell themselves as we're a family, be part of a family. And when you actually hear about the stuff that goes on within that organisation, it's nothing like a healthy family. And it's almost like using the sense of family belonging to haul people in, to give them a false sense of you're really going to be looked after. But unfortunately, the reality is in a lot of companies, you are a number.
Yeah.
And it's that thing where, that people are replaceable. And I know that sounds harsh, because at the end of the day, business is business. And it's almost like being able to find that fine line that when stuff happens, it's business, it's not personal. So it's almost like when redundancies happen, when stuff happens, I often find that a lot of the issues around people taking things personally, people holding on to grudges, people giving their all into that work. But why give your all into that work? Because your whole life isn't just work. That's part of your life. And sometimes you have to explore that with a client of, well, how did you position yourself when you went into that job? And if you're forgetting about all your work-life balance and everything else, well, when the redundancy came in or you were replaced, it would have felt so personal because you put your all in it. But surely it can't be healthy to give everything of you into your job.
No, absolutely. But I see my clients doing that, and then there is nothing left, and I have no idea what the statistics are. But when you give everything to the business out of economic necessity, or just to support the employees that you've got, there's often nothing left. There's just a vacuum, and they go home a shell. I say because I feel that personally as well sometimes. But the client goes home, and there's just nothing left to give, and that's not healthy, and that's not healthy for them. You and I have chatted, about kind of me coming home and having a couple of bodies and a glass or two of wine, with my meal, because it's kind of like okay, I'm not at work, I'm back in the room. Yeah. And actually, it's just escapism, and I know that, but I'm certainly not unique in that. And that is just crazy. If you're giving so much of yourself as a small business to that business, or to any business, that business, and your only escape is the only relief from the pressure is Coke or vodka or whatever it is the only relief of pressure you're going to get is the relief of pressure in your bloody heart, isn't it? You're going to bust a blood vessel.
It's interesting, Phil. I'm loving your honesty there. Like, I know we spoke about this before, and it was down to you whether you wanted to mention that or not, because so many people rely on that couple of drinks at the end of the day as a coping mechanism. And look, we all have coping mechanisms. Mine is I record the Channel 5 cheesy movie, and sometimes in between a day of having loads of clients, I would shut the curtains, shut the blinds, and I'll make a nice cup of coffee, a bar of chocolate, and I'll watch the cheesy Channel 5 movie. And that helps me to completely switch off.
Yeah.
Now, luckily, those movies don't control my life. So it's the balance between the two that we all need coping mechanisms. We all, self-regulating, if you like. Alcohol, absolutely fine. Look, we're not here to judge recreation drugs, whatever you do, folks, it's not for anybody to judge. But where people need to be careful is that if that coping mechanism starts controlling you. And then what I find then in my counselling sessions, we're looking at why that crutch is so needed. So we're not focusing on the actual drug of choice, we're focusing on why do you feel you need it so much. And it usually is to do with work-life balance. It's the fact that their tank is empty, that they're using all their time and energy in the work, and that they need some other things, whether that's a rock choir, whether that's, taking up squash, whether that's going to the gym before they go to work in the morning. It's looking at other ways to have looking after yourself. That's self-care. Self-care, I would say myself, Phil, if you were to ask me as a counsellor and with counselling clients, especially business owners, I would say self-care has got to be the number one priority, because it's not selfish, it's been self-full. We need to be self-full first so we can then look after the employees, clients, whoever it is.
Yeah. I mean, other releases are available. I haven't chosen to follow that path yet, but I need to I need to include them in the potential. Cold water swimming,
Yes.
putting on some leather clothing and popping on my motorcycle. Those kind of things are available also, as well as Coke and vodka. Meditation, reading, gong baths. All of those things are part of my to-do list, if I'm honest. That's why they kind of sprang to mind. Not that dressing up in leather. I'll leave that to the professionals.
You're not getting my motorbike, Phil. Let's just put that out there. I know what you're hinting. It's not working. The answer is no. I have no problem saying no, listeners, okay? You heard it from me.
I'm sure Mark would second that.
He will absolutely second that. Do you know, it's interesting when you said about the switching off, because that was something when we were talking about this before, Phil, and I was asking what were the common issues you come across with business owners. And I think one of them, on top of the loneliness, which we'll come back to, but one of the ones was switching off, find it so hard to switch their brains off, waking up in the middle of the night. You mentioned that earlier on.
Yeah, absolutely. The amount of emails that I get in the wee small hours of the morning, thankfully the phone's off. But you look at it and it's like 4:15, 4:30, 3:30. And it's like, what are you doing spending me on? Oh, well, I was awake and I needed to just get it off my plate and put that out there. I mean, I don't mind at all. It doesn't disturb me, but it's a reflection of just how unable many. I mean, we're focusing on business owners because we're both small businesses and we deal predominantly with kind of business owners. Well, I certainly do. But employees also, whether or not you're in a position of authority, whether you're a manager or a director, just because you've got a regular kind of paycheck coming in, the pressures are still there. Yeah, and that feeling of self-worth, your kind of, the annual figures is still there, and the requirement and the need to be able to A, switch off, and B, as an interim, find release mechanisms is still there. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so important. And the key is, going back to what you said, is you switch off your phone. So you have emails coming in at 4 o'clock, whatever time in the morning. That's the key. you switch off the phone. So that's again, it's like, how do you switch off? Well, first of all, you look at what's in your life and what you can actually switch off. Do you know what I mean? So it's taking that control back. It's taking that power back, because we can't control what other people do, but we can control how we receive it, or how or when we receive it, especially when it comes to technology.
I think it's and also, in a sense, sharing with others is a way of switching off, or at least
Yeah.
kind of halving what your brain is dealing with, because you're kind of sharing it with someone else and saying, well, what do you think? So we're talking business coaches, we're talking coaches
Yeah.
like yourself, wellness, any kind of wellness or mental health coach, but business coaches are a great way of sharing something, so you don't feel it's the weight is totally on your shoulders
Yeah.
alone, or your business partner
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
another one, or even your wife. If you're
Absolutely.
lucky enough still to have one.
Yeah, absolutely. It's having those resources. That helps combat the loneliness as well, because that was something that came up in our conversation, that it can be really lonely being a business owner. Sometimes there is a perception that because you're the owner, that you know loads of people, that you've lots of people you can go to, but actually it can be a very lonely place, because sometimes business owners feel like they can't speak to the people around them, especially if they're at work a lot, because they're their work colleagues, they work in different areas of the business, and sometimes they don't want to share what's actually going on underneath the surface, because they feel like they have to hold it together. So that when you say about the business coach, that's great, so having something like that. But like yourself in the HR, being able to speak confidential, like myself, counseling sessions, just being able to offload. The loneliness, like you and I feel a part of a networking group and have been for many years. And I definitely find that for myself, that I know every Thursday morning I'm going to see regular people. I'm going to have people I can chat to if I've got any business issues, but mainly I can have the crack. And that combats the loneliness, definitely. How about you? Are you the same?
Yeah, very much.
Yeah.
I'm here in my little kind of garret. I spend half the time here and half the time at my client's premises, by and large. But you always have to maintain even I have to maintain an element of professionalism, whether I'm here or whether I'm there with the client. But if you have a group of people with whom, and it can be a bunch of golfing partners, but for me, like you, it's in particular business first. Other networking groups are available.
Yes. Yeah.
But you can share worries. You can bounce ideas off people. You can say, look, I'm telling you this in confidentiality, and know that it's going to be
Yeah.
kept confidential. And you can have a laugh, which you
Oh,
can't necessarily do. You have to. It's kind of ridiculous, but there is still a perception that you've got to have your game face on when you're at work, and that's just nonsense, because you're still, in my case, Phil Watson, wherever you are, you can't
yeah.
escape that. Sadly, it's
Yeah.
a cross I have to bear. But you've got to have this kind of game face on, and there's an expectation that you're going to behave in a particular way because of your role, because of your seniority, if you've got any seniority. And that's all, as we know, horseshit. But it is the way it is out there.
Yeah, it's a funny one, Phil, isn't it? I suppose we look at code of conduct, and we'll say, like, so I abide by the ethics of the BACP, so that's British Association of Counsellors Psychotherapists, and they have a certain amount of code of conduct and expectations they expect of you. And I think that's fair enough. I think it's good to have things as a guideline, because I think there has to be an element of professionalism, certainly when you're at work. I think it's important that if there's people that you get on well and you have a bit of a dark sense of humor together, I think it's great if you can have that between yourselves, because it is such a two PC world. We know that. So I think it's great if you can have that amongst yourselves, either away from work or at lunch lunchtime where you can still have those outlets, because for some people, humor is life-saving actually to have that. So, and I think with humor as well, it's almost to check out with people. If you want to have a laugh with more colleagues and stuff like that, you can always ask rather than assume. I know that was one of my earlier mental health shows. You've been to many of them, Phil, which is brilliant. Where I spoke about the difference between assume, which can be broken down, making an ass out of you and me, as opposed to ask. So sometimes if you've got a dark sense of humor and you really want to like go with it within your organization, you can kind of ask and check that out. And most people are up for a laugh, and there is a fine line, because there has to be a certain amount of professionalism. There does has, because we'd all go. We'd all, do you know what I mean? We wouldn't be able to function. I suppose there are certain boundaries to function as a society. There has to be, But then it's also having like you and I are both very creative people. You and I, Phil, are very similar in that we do such a serious job that we have got a quirky, silly, stupid, un-PC sense of humour. And you and I can really have a laugh, when we need to and stuff like that. So it is important that isn't taken away from you and I. It's just that other people mightn't appreciate it. Does that make sense?
Very much. Yeah, very much. And so, yeah, I mean, if you have to take it, well away from work to your golf partners, or take it onto a squash court or whatever, then that's also good. But I think just that awareness and carving time is a massive problem for everyone I work with, because they're very aware of their obligations at home, as they are their obligations at work. But time for themselves, actually just following away a little bit of that 24-hour day for themselves, is often impossible for them, or they believe it to be impossible, or they haven't had some medical warning note. They haven't, they haven't had a stroke to tell them just how important it is. And so just that awareness, and maybe if all we do today is just give one person one aha moment, that would be worth it. When I must stop talking about doing this. I need to actually get out and see some sunlight and get out. And I tell you what, I'm going to walk the dog tonight, even though I've got loads of emails to reply to and blah, 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 blah. I'm going to get out there.
Yeah, I love that, Phil. It is sometimes we need to have these conversations so we could just stop for that bit of time and think, hang on a minute, how am I using my time? And am I using it too much to just put more and more work on top of me when I'm actually becoming counterproductive, because I'm not giving myself that time to switch off, to walk the dog, to do stuff, to look after my body? Because as we said, we don't want the body to eventually give us a stroke, to give us that massive message of you need to stop actually because you're doing too much.
Yeah. And when you do stop, and you're lucky enough to stop and have a holiday. I've got a wife who makes me do that on a regular basis, and it's great. The more of those you do, the more you realise, my God, what am I doing? I'm sleepwalking here through life, and the ripe old age that I am. There ain't that many. I mean, I was talking with my IFA. Chris and I's IFA the other day, and it gives you this great kind of visual about what your pension's doing, and there's this little gravestone at 90 for me, and hers is about 94, I think, and it's really quite good, and that's with a following wind, and if you just stop being such a pillock sometimes on a night out, Philip, you might actually, but that's not that far away. And I've spent 66 years sleepwalking towards that, and now I'm finally seeing, oh my God, that gap is just diminishing. I need to be grabbing onto every day, every minute of every day, and squeezing something out of it for me. It sounds greedy and selfish, but ultimately,
Yeah.
um,
Not at all.
you.
Each their own. It's interesting. I feel like you was an amazing statement where you said about sleepwalking through life, and you were saying about those aha moments. One of the aha moments that tends to happen in my sessions with particular business owners is when I ask them why did they decide to run their own business in the first place? Why did they move from being an employee to being the employer? And most times they'll say because they wanted more time. And then I will ask them something like, so who makes the decisions? And they go, well, I do. How is your decisions working out for you?
Yeah.
So then I highlight, so you're actually the one in control. Because oftentimes they go into this because they want to have more control. But what they don't realize is they get so caught up with overwhelm and overload and feeling like they have to do everything for everybody else. They end up being the employee, even though they're the employer.
Yeah.
And it is fascinating. I would say to anybody listening to this, whether you're an employee or an employer, and you're just feeling overwhelmed and everything's getting on top of you, think about why you're doing what you're doing. Actually, because a lot of times it won't be about work. It'll be to do with more time and more money to do stuff, relationships, and sometimes you do have to work out that balance. Is it really worth it? And sometimes people are so much happier when they earn less because they can do more. And it is just being aware of so many different options. I mean, I'm mindful of time at the moment, Phil, because I know we're coming towards, the last part of our podcast. So, from yourself with that HR hat on, if you have any business owners, employers that are listening here, I don't know what would be the key points that you would really want them to take from the stuff that we've discussed here, to reflect on, to be mindful of.
Okay, find a confidant if you haven't already got one. It doesn't have to be a paid for professional like me. I'm a rent boy and not a particularly cheap one. But find a confidant that you
Yeah.
can offload some of your pressures to, and that might be a partner, it might be your best friend, it might be a business coach. But make sure that it's not all on your shoulders. That will help to relieve some of the pressure.
Yeah.
Don't allow yourself to be in a position of loneliness where there's only you making those decisions for a million reasons, but not least because actually we are designed to be social animals. So it's just completely against our genetic makeup. And find some space to switch off. I mean, I don't care if it's gaming in front of a computer or going out, cycling, walking the dog, whatever it is, puzzles, reading. It doesn't matter, but just make sure that part of your day is dedicated to that, because subliminally your brain isn't stopping working on all those business issues that you've got, still whirring away in the background, and you're just giving it the space to do that without actually using your frontal lobes to do it, which releases some tension and some pressure. And don't just don't be alone. Loneliness is telling this to you, it, but
And
loneliness is a killer. Do not ever allow yourself into that cycle of loneliness where you feel nobody else can understand, will listen, because the consequences are often a one-way street, regrettably.
Yeah, absolutely, Phil. Just to mention again, because my previous podcast was speaking to Elliot from Andy Mann's Club. So it's just, again, to know that there's places out there that you can go to. And Andy Mann's Club is, nationwide. It's definitely worth looking into. It's helped so many guys. And the same way for the females. There's so many different groups to join that you don't have to be on your own. And even if that means finding a group with social media or just being brave, just putting yourself out there. I mean, when I moved to the UK 22 years ago, I didn't know one person over here. And that's the thing. Sometimes you just got to put yourself out there. I mean, my way was quite extreme, Phil. I got my guitar, I went down to local park and I started playing tunes. I'm not saying everybody's up for doing that, but I can tell you something, by the end of the day, I had a whole crowd of people sitting around listening to me and just couldn't believe that I'd left my homeland and just decided to give something new a chance. What had I got to lose? And there we go. So, we deserve to choose our own lives. We deserve to be aware of all the different options that are out there, that sometimes people can feel really trapped, but actually it's because it feels that way because of how you're feeling. And that sometimes it is the case of just speaking to people and allowing yourself to explore the many different options. So we can have satisfied lives and fulfilled lives and have our sense of humor and our laugh and have that enjoyment, Phil. So Phil, again, thank you so much. I know Ben, who does my editing, he'll put the link to your website in the chat. I know that Phil is great, listeners, that if any of you have any HR issues and if you just want to run something past Phil, at least if you email him at 4:15 in the morning, he won't respond to you. He'll have his phone switched off. He's now giving the fingers to the camera. See, this is the true Phil coming out. This is what we know we need to find it, because anybody who knows Phil Watson will be so surprised that he hasn't used profanities throughout this podcast. He has done amazingly well.
Making into a sweat here, look.
Yeah, you see, there you go. It's definitely time to bring it to an end here. Phil, thank you so much for your time. Really, really appreciate it.
It's always good to talk to you, whether I need to or just to chat. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you for listening to Counsellor Convos with Sheila McMahon. If you've enjoyed this episode, consider checking out her YouTube channel or pop on her website, mindmanagementforyou.com.